Megasthenes occupies a structurally important but intellectually unstable position in ancient historiography. He is often presented as a neutral observer of India, but in reality he functioned like within a framework of state diplomacy, strategic observation, and cultural misinterpretation. His account Indica remains the earliest extensive European description of India. However, its value lies not in accuracy but in what it reveals about the cross-civilizational perception, bias, and power dynamics. Today, I'm going to be dissecting Megasthenes not as a passive traveler but as an embedded agent within a geopolitical structure, whose writings must be treated as filtered intelligence rather than objective history. Geopolitical context: the post-Alexandrian power vacuum. The mission of Megasthenes cannot be understood without analyzing the aftermath of the Alexander the Great's campaign. Following Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his empire fractured during the wars of the Diadochi, leading to the emergence of competing Hellenistic kingdoms. One of these successors, Seleucus I Nicator I, attempted to reassert control over eastern territories, including parts of the Indian subcontinent. However, he encountered a new force, Chandragupta Maurya, who had already been consolidated who had already consolidated power across northern India. Rather than pursuing prolonged conflicts, Seleucus opted for a strategic recalibration. Territorial concessions in exchange for diplomatic relations, establishment of embassies instead of military campaigns, long-term engagement over short-term conquests. Megasthenes was the instrument of this strategy. His presence at the Mauryan court represents a shift from military expansion to intelligence-driven diplomacy. The journey controlled exposure, not exploration. Megasthenes' travels are often romanticized as exploratory, but this interpretation collapses under scrutiny. His routine was tightly constrained: entry through Punjab, Penta, Pentapotamia region, move alongside established administrative corridors, final residence at Pataliputra. This was not a free-ranging investigation of India. It was a state-managed exposure where access was limited to political and economic significant zones. Specifically, this implication is direct. The implication is direct. His observations are biased towards urban elite and administrative realities. Rural, peripheral, and dissenting elements remain largely invisible. The India he describes is not India as a whole, but India as curated by the Mauryan authority. Indica, a fragmented knowledge system. The work attributed to Megasthenes says Indica no longer exists in its original form. What survives are fragments and preserved by later authors such as Arrian and Diodorus Siculus. This creates a layered distortion. Original observation of Megasthenes, interpretation and recording by later historians, modern reconstruction by modern scholars and learned persons. Each layer introduces potential biases, omissions, and reinterpretations. The result is not a primary source but a reconstructed narrative built on selective preservation. The structure weakness is obvious. You are not reading Megasthenes, you are reading what others chose to retain from him. Political observation, centralized authority, and power control. Megasthenes presents the Mauryan state as a highly organized monarchy under Chandragupta Maurya. Key features include direct involvement of the king in judicial processes, a highly structured administrative apparatus, constant fear of assassination. These observations reveal a fundamental reality: power concentration generates internal instability. A ruler who centralizes authority must be simultaneously invested in surveillance, security, and control mechanisms. The Mauryan state appears efficient, but it is also fragile under internal pressure. Megasthenes unintentionally exposes this contradiction. The stronger the ruler appears, the more resources are required to maintain that strength. Administrative structure: early bureaucratic rationalization. One of Megasthenes' most significant contributions is his description of administrative organizations in Pataliputra. A governing council of 30 members, division into specialized committees, oversight of trade, industry, and public welfare. This suggests the existence of a pro-bureaucratic system characterized by functional specialization, delegation of authority, institutional governance beyond the individual ruler. From a systems perspective, this represents an early form of state capacity optimization. where administrative efficiency becomes a tool of control. Social classification, misreading the caste system. Megasthenes claimed that the Indian society was divided into seven distinct groups, is one of the most cited but fundamentally flawed observations. He lists categories such as philosophers, farmers, soldiers, artisans, and spies. This classification reflects a Greek tendency to organize society into functional categories. However, it fails to capture the complexity of the Indian Varna and Jati system, which is hierarchical rather than purely functional, embedded in ritual, religion, and lineage, far more granular and fluid than his model suggests. This is a textbook case of cognitive projection. He didn't fully understand the Indian society, he translated it into a Greek framework he could comprehend. Economic insights, state control, and resource extraction. Megasthenes described a system with extensive agriculture production, with huge organized labor divisions, and a significant state involvement. These features indicate a state with high extraction capacity capable of mobilizing large amount of labor within a shorter frame of time, regulating production as well as maintaining a stable surplus for a longer period of time. From a power perspective, this is critical. A state's strength is not ideological, it is logistical. The Mauryan Empire's ability to sustain armies and administrative systems was rooted in its economic infrastructure, not merely its leadership. Geography and knowledge limits. Megasthenes references regions such as the Himalayas, Tibet, Sri Lanka. However, much of this information was not based on direct observation. Instead, it relied on second-hand reports, local informants, speculative interpretations. This introduces a clear boundary between observed reality and reported knowledge. He had direct access, his descriptions are relatively structured. He relied on hearsay, his work deteriorates with inaccuracy and myth and credibility collapse. Among the most damaging elements in Megasthenes' account are his references to gold-digging ants, exotic semi-mythical creatures. These inclusions undermine his credibility. They demonstrate a failure to filter unreliable information, a willingness to include sensational claims, a lack of methodological rigor. From an analytical standpoint, this is not a minor flaw. It signals that his work must be treated as unverified intelligence rather than validated knowledge. Comparative significance, why he still matters today. Despite his flaws, Megasthenes remains indispensable. He provides the earliest external account of India, a comparative perspective between Greek and Indian systems, baseline data for reconstruction of the Mauryan administration. However, his value is conditional. He is useful only when cross-referenced with internal sources such as the Arthashastra of Kautilya, who is also called Acharya Sri Vishnugupta Chanakya, Ashokan inscriptions, indigenous traditions. Without triangulation, his work becomes a distorted lens rather than a reliable source. Historiographical implications, the problem of external narrative. Megasthenes represents a broader issue in historiography. External observers often dominate narratives about civilization. Their accounts are treated as authoritative despite structural biases. Indigenous perspectives are marginalized or lost. This creates a hierarchy of knowledge where outsider interpretation overrides internal reality. The result isn't history, it is filtered perception shaped by power, access, and agenda. Conclusion: intelligence, not truth. Megasthenes should not be approached as a historian to be trusted. He should be approached as a data point to be interrogated. His work reflects strategic diplomacy, cultural misunderstanding, selective observation, fragmented perception, fragmented preservation. If treated uncritically, he misleads. If analyzed rigorously, it reveals the structure of the Mauryan state, the limits of cross-cultural understanding, the mechanics of early geopolitical intelligence. This distinction is simple. He is not a source of truth. He is a source of information under constraint. And if that distinction is ignored, the analysis collapses.